everybody. My name is Sarai Cook, and I'm the founder of the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. Today, I'm bringing on several of my very close friends. We're going to talk about racial trauma, and we're going to talk about being biracial, mixed race, and how that's affected us in our lives, and how we feel about it. So before I get started, I'm going to read a little bit about what racial trauma is. Racial trauma, or race-based traumatic stress, RBTS, refers to the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias and ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crimes. Any individual that has experienced an emotional, painful, sudden, and uncontrollable racist encounter is at risk of suffering from a race-based traumatic stress injury. So that's what racial trauma is. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I think each and every one of us here have experienced this. And so I'm going to go around and we're going to introduce ourselves in the way that we feel comfortable. After that, I'm going to talk about why I wanted to have this discussion. And then each one of us will give some comments and we'll have some group discussion. Each one of us on here is multiracial. So my name, again, is Sarai Cook. I'm from the Muskogee Creek Nation, or Muskogee Nation, Laptako Tribal Town, Ceremonial Ground and Church. I'm from the Wayne Clan. Jacinta, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Jacinta Ritchie. I'm from the Missisquoi Band of Abenaki and Cree from Saskatchewan, Wolf Clan. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Barb?
Anin Buju, Adishni Akasa Satsaminanikwe. Hello, greetings. My name is Barbara Gladu. My Indian name is Cherry Woman. I am an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. I am also a member of the Little Shell Band of Chippewa. Good evening.
Carolyn?
My name is Carolyn Presnow, and I'm really grateful to be here. I am the daughter to Christina Stell and the daughter of Byron Hunter. Thank you.
Yvette?
Ivi Jude Seedsta, Doaps Judd. I am Yvette from the Duwamish tribe.
So, I had an experience. We were in a sweat lodge. Barb was the leader of the sweat lodge. She was leading us in that. We had invited a guest, and the guest, she said, I have the blood of the oppressor and the blood of the oppressed. And it really stuck with me when she said that. And I thought about it for a really long time. I feel like all my life growing up, being my mom's white, my dad's native, I don't know how I look to other people. I know who I am and what I am and where I'm from. And but I've always, I think people think I'm racially ambiguous, I guess they would say. People would call me racially ambiguous. And so that leads to a lot of questions. And the questions are very triggering a lot of times because it's like questioning my identity and who I know I am. And that's something that I experienced only really here in America, because in America here, it seems like we're a very race-based culture. If we see someone that looks a little bit, not, standard, it's always wondering what race they are. And that's not something that other countries do. I've traveled around the world, and most countries identify you by your country, by your nationality. So like when I was in Asia, they would say, oh, okay, you're American. And even, like Mexico and other countries, they identify people by their nationality. And here in America, we get identified by our race a lot. I feel like, one of the things that it said in the racial trauma was having a lot of bias. Non-Native people constantly ask me how much I am or what my blood quantum is as far as being Native. And like for me, that's it's very disrespectful of who I am. That's not how we identify ourselves. As far as from my tribe, we identify ourselves by who our family is, who our clan is, what ceremonial ground we're from, tribal town. That's how we identify ourselves. So we don't identify ourselves like that. And I think, to me, it feels as if people want to put me in a box all the time. They're constantly wanting to put me in a box. So if I tell them what race I am, then automatically they bring all these biases that they have about that race. And then even make comments about like alcohol and drug use and things that are not a part of my culture, like powwows, are just not a part of my particular tribe's culture. Ask me inappropriate questions that they don't need to know, and it's not really, if it's kind of like a lot of things I feel tribally for me is, if you don't know, then you're not supposed to know. And I feel like it's so I've developed PTSD indicators. So I have the PTSD checklist right here. And it asks you these questions to see if you're experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's about 6 of these on here that I experience every time I go into a non-Native place, a non-Native work environment, a non-Native educational environment, because I know that they're going to ask me inappropriate questions, and they do. And it triggers repeated disturbing and unwanted memories. It triggers me feeling upset and reminds me of stressful experiences. It triggers strong physical reactions. It triggers strong negative beliefs about myself and others and the world. It triggers strong negative feelings such as fear, horror, anger, guilt, and shame. It triggers me losing interest in activities that I used to enjoy, feeling distant and cut off from other people, trouble experiencing positive feelings, irritable behavior, angry outbursts, and acting aggressively, difficulty concentrating, being super alert and watchful and on guard. Those are some of the PTSD triggers that I experience when people are saying biased comments to me about me being mixed race. And it's really hurtful. And I think it's very limiting. It limits me. And I know that part of that is myself, because I have feelings inside about these things that I haven't come to terms with. So when people, make comments about my race or my culture, then it triggers these negative feelings in me. And it makes it harder for me to just live life and go into different spaces and do the work that I need to do with the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. Because, a lot of what I need to do is to go into these spaces and to educate people. And there's so much bias there that it makes my job a lot harder. So I guess I just want to know that I'm not the only one. And I know I'm not. There's millions of people in the United States that feel like I feel. And it's not just about around issues around being Native. It's, it's all the Black, Indigenous, people of color communities that we have, mixed race people. And I know there's millions of people out there that feel the exact same way when they have to go into these spaces and hear comments about their skin color or the way they talk or the way they're dressed, the way we choose to talk or dress or decide how we present ourselves. So I just want to have a discussion about that. So now I'm going to just kind of do a round robin, and I'll start with Carolyn. Do you have anything that you want to say on this, about your experience with being multiracial?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could say a lot of things. I appreciated the checklist. I sometimes wonder if everybody in America can answer that question in that way. I was thinking, I was with you when we were at Sweat, and I've forgotten her name now, but her statement about being a descendant of the oppressor and the oppressed, like that resonated with me, because that's absolutely my experience, is that like my mother's people were Haitian. Were Austrian, and my father's people were Haitian. And interestingly enough, my father just passed last week, and I am really resonant with this experience of relationship with my ancestors. And I'm claiming my parents in a way that I haven't claimed my parents in a long time, if ever, really. I'm acutely aware of being my father's daughter and acutely aware of being my mother's daughter. But I absolutely grew up with that. I'm the first child of color born into my mother's family, and deeply religious family on the white side. And I'm the first acknowledged child of color born into my father's people, because they came from Haitian slaves. We are the tribe of Hunter. And the impact was immediate. My interpretation, and I don't know whether or not somebody was trying to suggest, this ideal, but my interpretation was really early on is that I didn't have a place here, and that really what my job was to kind of stay under the radar. Don't make too much distraction. Don't draw attention to yourself. And I absolutely, much of my life, have experienced not being Black enough and not being white enough, in whatever environment I was in. And I'm sure that experience was colored by my initial belief systems about, like my arrival to the planet. I wonder if that would have been so acute had there been some nurturing or guidance or information around what it was like. But I'm an older broad, shit, I'm over 50, and so it was the 70s, and it was a very different time. I mean, for a white woman to walk down the street with a Black man was a cause for trouble, and it could bring trouble to your family and to your children. And so but yeah, my experience was absolutely colored by that, and it has taken me a lot of deep internal seeking to really be in relationship with both cultures to heal that. Some acceptance of that, because there were times when I wished I was just Black, and there were times I wished that I was just white, so that I could experience the privilege that I perceived people who were one race had. And so, yeah, I think that's really my contribution up to this point.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jacinta, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks, Soraya, for putting this together. When you originally were asking like how to introduce yourself, right? I'm so used to being this social chameleon and adapting to whatever environment that I'm in, right? So I'll model how I introduce myself after whoever's leading, right? So in that, and then also in our Native community, right? We honor all of our ancestors in our introduction. And I'm really looking forward to the day where I can come in and introduce myself in my language, right? But it's going to be languages. because the truth of my identity is that I'm not biracial. I'm like multiracial. So it'll be, you know, my family's been into the whole interracial marriage thing for a long time. So, you know, and I really do strive to have integrity in how I show up. And integrity to me is being undivided, right? And honoring all those ancestors. So, you know, my grandmother, 3 of her grandparents were Abenaki. Her mother's mother was Cree. And, you know, I also come from like a long line of samurai who came here before World War II. You know, my great grandmother was the last sword carrying samurai in the family. There's like Sicilian and even the Caucasian part of me as well. Like there's like 5, 6 different ethnic groups. And even within the white communities back then, it wasn't super acceptable to intermarry between, you know, Scottish, German, British, whatever. So, and I know in my experience of what it depends on how my hair's cut, you know, and my experience growing up was like, oh, like, what are you? It's that ethnic ambiguity and people want to be able to put you into a box. And it's like, how much time do you have? You know, I got a lot of like people to list off. And my response when I was younger would be like, you know, human. And even between my brother and I, you know, blood of my blood, same mom, same dad, he's much more melanated than me. You know, he has more ethnic features from my mother's side. And we've grown up being treated differently. And I know growing up, I've gone through different phases of trying to love and honor all my ancestors, right? Because I went through a phase where I was like, oh my God, like I got colonizer blood in me, you know, and it caused this like self-hatred thing that I've had to come to terms with. And, you know, my father's aunt, she's always been a great person to me. And she got really upset because she felt like I was honoring my other ancestry more than, you know, her part. Right. And I was like, well, like, tell me more about like this heritage that we have, because I want to connect with that as well. And so that's a big part of my journey, just to, you know, and my grandpa and my, you know, the different side of my family, they'd be like, the kids keep on adding cream to the coffee. Right. And it was this like bad thing that they kept on getting with, you know, the grandkids kept on getting paler and paler. And he'd be like, you know, Jacinta, like your skin's white, but your soul's brown. And like, don't forget who you are and where you come from. So it's just been a journey for me to learn about where I come from, figure out how to honor that, honor all my ancestors and how I show up every day. And I definitely do have a lot of experiences where, you know, my ethnicity is questioned. People want to ask me like, oh, like how native are you though? And it's like real native. Okay. You know, like I'm lucky that I know some of my traditions, and my grandmother did a lot of work to do cultural revitalization for herself, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Right. And I want to be able to pass on this legacy where my children know where they come from and they know the traditions that are sacred to us, you know. I don't know. I think I've been rambling for a long time, but basically it's just an ongoing journey. And it's really painful sometimes to have to be like a forensic cultural anthropologist to try to figure out where you came from and learn your language, you know, and learn how to walk in both worlds, right? Hold your traditions, but also be able to interface with, you know, academia or the legal system or whatever it may be, and be in integrity while I do that, as a whole person, not just a part person. Like I'll end with this, like, you know, I've stopped saying I'm part this, I'm part that, you know, I'm 100% all those things. And I'm grateful for all the ancestors that like survived enough for me to be here, you know? So I think this is a really important discussion, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I think it's really healing, and more people need to have awareness of how the things they say can be hurtful, you know, and where that legacy comes from. So that's enough out of me.
Thank you. Barbara, Yvette, does one of you have a feeling that you want to go, or?
I can go next. I heard a lot of things that I've said before from each and every one of you that spoke. Even from starting from my early ancestral history, Chief Seattle, his niece is my great-great-great-grandmother, and she married a Jamaican slave. And he was a cook on the pilgrim ships going back and forth to Europe. So I have pictures of some of my even my grandmother has curly hair. I have curly hair. And I have, you know, native full blood, and here we go with that term, right? Full blood native cousins out on the reservations with thick curly hair. So, however, my story starts, I think my trauma started from birth. My mom was raped when she was conceived with me. And I was, she had thought that she was pregnant with my sister's father, which was Black. So all my brothers and sisters are Black Indigenous. When I turned out white at the hospital, I was left at the hospital for the, you know, first 3 months of my life. However, it was dangerous to have me. My mom, we lived in Cabrini Greens in Chicago. My mom fit in because she was dark, native, high cheekbones. I was ultimately kept in the apartment for 5 years of my life because it was a danger for me to be white. My mom decided to come back and get me. So when I was started to get exposed to Chicago, every day I had to fight because there were no multiracial natives. You were either Black or white. And it was life or death. You know, it felt like going out to school. And my sister, you know, I got beat up one time, and my sister, you know, let me know if I ever got my ass whooped again, she'd whoop it too. And so learning how to fight was a survival skill for me. And I prided myself on never getting beat up, but only one time, right? So that's kind of where my trauma started with being, you know, multiracial. I personally don't consider myself multiracial because the only experience that I know is from a Native mother. I don't have the luxury, because where I was born in Chicago, I don't have that luxury of going into a room and blending in with white people. I have tried to develop myself in the real estate industry. I can polish up really nice, dress up really nice, look really professional and polished, maintain my body language and control my words and how I speak my words. For the first 2 weeks, I get a job. And then after 2 weeks, I'm on that chopping block from who's hired me or the office. And they're like, Yvette, can we ask you a question? What nationality are you? And this is my last experience. And I knew right then I wasn't accepted. I knew I didn't fit in. I knew that my cover was blown. And they all took turns in that office guessing my race. The first guess was Black. The second guess was Egyptian. The third guess was Mexican. And at this point, I kind of shut down, and I knew I wasn't going to go back to work. And so then coming up to Washington, you know, going back a little bit, coming up to Washington, it was a larger transition because my Native family were racist, you know, because, you know, we had, my grandmother used to say, I guess from what I'm hearing from my aunts and them, that we had coal in the fire, right? And they're coming from an era where they tried to hide to even be Native. And so here I am, this girl from Chicago, that I am in identity crises. I don't know what I am, right? I'm thinking Columbus discovered America. Because the education back there, I was barely educated coming up here. So when I went out to the reservation, Suquamish and Tulalip, and met my family, a lot of the reaction, people were like, "What are you?" And, I had heard a saying many years ago, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I really gravitated to that because, later on, I just kind of embodied, I'm human. I'm the human race, and, we're spiritual beings. And that's what kind of started opening my awareness and my evolution as a human, because most of my experience, most of my judgment, most of my trauma, and all my trauma has come from what I'm perceived to look like to others, and come from, my Native experience. My mother was a dislocated and displaced Native. She was a Native slave. Literally, she was adopted by a non-Native family, a white family, to be the Hands Farm's help while their daughter went to school and did all that. And my mom was solely just adopted to be their farm hands. So my entire experience, and still to this day, has been based on my appearance and how people perceive me and my reaction to it. I'm still dealing with that. I'm learning my language and choosing to heal through my culture. And I still get looks from darker skinned Native women, especially. I get that look like I'm not Native, or I'm not Native enough. And I see it, I can identify it more than most. So that's kind of like, that's been my experience. And thank you for allowing me to speak on this.
Thank you, Yvette.
Thank you.
Well, hello. I hope that you can hear me. My internet might go in and out. I have helicopters flying above me. I'm on a military base. So if you can't hear me, I'm sorry. Let me know, I don't know. So, I identify with a lot of what the ladies have already said about, kind of, and so kind of what for me kind of resonate or floated to the top was, this, growing up, the very first experience that I can really remember that was kind of major, where I was like, somebody told me what I was, as a kid. I didn't, I don't know if you really know. Maybe some do, but I was young, and we lived multi-generationally with my grandparents on their ranch, somewhat of a ranch, and my aunts and uncles and mom and dad. We had a trailer on my grandparents' land, and we all lived there, and we had horses, and my cousins and I we were all raised really, together, and I can't remember, we were young. We were 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, and we were playing cowboys and Indians, because where I'm from in Montana, that's really kind of the only races there are, or were when I was growing up. And so we were playing cowboys and Indians, and nobody wanted to be Indian, because really, even at a young age, what I was told an Indian person was a drunk, no good, jobless, worthless, you know, bum on the street. Couldn't trust them. You couldn't, you know, they were just no good. And so none of us wanted to be Indians. And it wasn't just, you know, what we heard from school, but we did hear, you know, that we were surrounded by reservations, you know, and we had family, you know, that we would visit on and off the reservation. And I grew up really what was considered, as a Little Shell person, I grew up on Hill 57, and that's where my family came from. In fact, I have relatives who on their birth certificate says they're born on the Hill 57 Indian reservation. Well, it's not really a reservation. It's just where all the Indians were kept out of town, out of sight, out of mind, you know. And so, and we were landless for a long time until, you know, we were the last tribe actually to be federally recognized. And so anyways, and so we were playing Cowboys and Indians, and my Aunt Sharon came up and she said, "What are you talking about? You guys are all Indians," because we were all arguing and we wanted to be cowboys. You know, we had horses, we were cowboys. And I just remember, like, we're Indian, and we were very curious about that. And really from that time on, like, it was kind of maybe the first time that I can really remember thinking about, oh, well, if I'm Indian, then what that people are saying is not true. Because I'm not a drunk. I'm not a no good, lousy, you know, worthless, you know. But I definitely didn't look like this image that I had in my mind, or the image that, you know, was portrayed, you know, in Hollywood. And you know, and neither was my family really, you know. And so my mother and her, you know, my mother's side, they're white, and my father's side is Indian, and they're Michif people. They're mixed blood, you know. We're from Canada originally, and so we, from as far back as I know, we were mixed blood people. And so and so I don't know. So growing up, yes, absolutely. I remember, you know, not long when I was young, we went and we moved to Browning, which is Blackfeet Nation, and I went to school, and the kids were so mean to me because, and you know, in my day, it was, you were called a half breed, and half breed was like, you know, a terrible thing to be, you know. And so you couldn't be white or you couldn't be Indian. You were just, now all of a sudden you were this disgrace to both races. And so, and I remember as I was in first grade and I locked myself in the bathroom, and I wouldn't come out. My mom had to come and get me because the kids were so mean to me. You know, and so I just remember, you know, how terrifying that felt, you know. And also I think, like, looking back now, I probably also was terrified because I didn't grow up around all Native kids. You know, I grew up around mixed blood people. And so when I then went to, you know, Browning, Montana, where it's, you know, a conglomeration of all Blackfeet people, it was just a different experience for me. And so, I mean, looking back now, I can see that it wasn't just maybe them. It was also, you know, this society that had said all these terrible things about Indian people. And also, you know, that scared me, you know, and, you know, now that I'm older, I realized that I had to really, you know, decolonize my thinking, because I recognized that about, even when I would be around, you know, Black communities or other communities where they would be the majority and I would be the light skin, and I would be uncomfortable. And so it was all this socialization that I'm taught to be afraid, you know, and even in our own even in my grandparents' home, like, my grandma and grandpa who are Indian, they were super racist too. I heard, all kinds of language, the N word and, any other really race besides, besides maybe white and we didn't even really talk too much about brown. We were almost, both of my grandparents were raised in boarding schools from the time they were very young until the time that they aged out. And so they were very whitewashed, their thinking. But my grandparents came from, my grandma, actually, when the nuns came and got her, they lived on a teepee. Her dad, because her mom had died, they lived in a teepee on the Missouri River, and her dad was a logger. Because that's really all that Indian people, one of the jobs that they would allow Indian people to do was to log. And I grew up, in a log. My dad and my grandpa and log. So, anyways, I could go on and on about all of the things that I had to face as a light-skinned person, even from my white family, like, in summers, like we would, just be kids and be out and playing, and we would get really dark, and my uncles and stuff would pinch us under the arms and be like, "Oh, you dirty little," and they call us prairie with the N word, and so that was kind of, that happened all the time. And I remember my white aunt, she would give hand-me-downs, clothes. And, but she would tell my mom that she didn't want, that we could wear them, but that she didn't want to see us in her daughter's clothes. And so, and that was because they were ashamed that we were Indian. And she was, they hated my dad for good reason. My dad was or is an alcoholic and was very abusive, and so that kind of played into that, that idea of Indians being, alcoholics and no good. So yeah, I don't know. I think for me, and I also, and another huge thing that I want to say is, like, growing up here in this country, like, we were really, cultureless. We've built, this American culture around, like, Christmas and Thanksgiving and, these holidays that are just really made up, really, and made to bring, like, happiness and serenity to some really oppressive, genocidal, really savage behavior that, really, colonized this country and colonizes many other countries. And so, and so kind of learning who I am and, the people that I come from, and for me, it's mostly been a journey of learning, my Native ancestry, learning about, that culture and revitalizing that culture, and through language and song and ceremony and tradition has really helped me to feel still or stable or, or at least confident in who I am. And so I definitely had the identity struggle for the longest time until I was able to, to realize that I do have roots, and they are seated in this land. And, my people come from this land, and so I don't know, I could go on and on, like probably everybody else, but I feel like I've kind of shared enough. So
thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. So the next thing I want to talk about, like, I'll just tell my experience about dominant society. So I think this is a good topic, dominant society. So I'm white, and I'm Native. But when I think about being white, I think about dominant society and what that represents, the whiteness. I think about the laws that we have in this country, you know, those Christmas and Thanksgiving and all those things, and like what it means to be white and what it means to fit into white society. And that's the dominant society, dominant white society. There are white people that don't fit in white dominant society. You know, growing up, I know that even from my mom wouldn't have fit in the white dominant society. You know, she grew up in foster care, and, you know, she was a teen mother, had her first child at 15, and then had me. And, you know, I grew up from home to home, and, you know, grew up with a lot of different people raised me. I had for a very long time, I called a Black woman my mother and another white woman my mother. And, you know, and just like I had all these people raise me. And then that led me to, you know, then when I hit puberty, I had a lot of trauma, and I wasn't able to function in school in that dominant society. I've never been able to function in that dominant society. Never been able to function in school. I've never been able to function in sort of really super regulated dominant society types of places. I've never, you know, fit anywhere. And I think that it's part of the human condition, or it's part of being human. You know, we're pack animals. We want to, like, you know, a couple of 100 years ago, or 100, 200 years ago, and even now, but if you don't have people, you die. Like, you would die. And so it's that there's this thing in us that wants to fit somewhere. And I never had that. But yeah, that dominant society thinking, dominant society of weighing a being, dominant society of top down to everything. There's a hierarchy. There's a way you're supposed to be. There's a way you're supposed to fit. There's a way you're supposed to act. There's etiquette. There's rules to this thing. And I kind of saw through that. I've always seen through that from a very young age. I'm like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I would question everything. And it just didn't seem right. A lot of things in society didn't seem right to me. It didn't fall well on me. And, you know, I completely rejected that. I felt that because I wasn't able to fit in, like, at school, and I wasn't able to follow the rules, I wasn't able to sit still and be quiet and just listen. I was constantly questioning things. I would question authority. And what that did was end me up incarcerated. And even in there, you know, I was questioning everything and everybody. And I was like, no, something's not right here. No, this isn't right. I'm not being treated right. You're putting, this dominant society is putting all these labels on me and putting these things on me that I don't think about myself. You know, juvenile, delinquent, criminal, you know, all these labels. So just, you know, trying to fit into that dominant society has been really rough. And then, like, going through higher education, the things that they would say, you know, being in college, and the things and conversations that we would have in college were very offensive to me. And just being around, being forced to, like, if I wanted an education, if I wanted to get any kind of security in my life, and by security, I mean credentials, education, employment, and money to live, you know, there's a certain part of having to fit into that dominant society. And even now with the National Trauma Awareness Initiative, you know, where does the money come from? Where's the money that's going to fund me come from? The government, the federal government, state government, nonprofits, other foundations. And who are all those people? Dominant society people that are able to fit into dominant society. So they've gotten to positions of power where they have money to give to people. And so, like, even now, you know, I do struggle with that. I don't see things the way that they see them. I don't see that this system that we're living in works. It doesn't work for me, you know, as a multiracial person, as a biracial person. It doesn't work for me, you know, just because of the experiences that I've had. I don't subscribe to their beliefs. I don't subscribe to their value systems. I don't subscribe to the labels and things that they're, I guess, the ideas that they're trying to impress upon me and the organization, and just like who I am as a person and who I am as a formerly incarcerated woman. And like, I was in a meeting, there was a very prominent lady in the meeting, and she's like, "Oh, you're Native. Well, you should be working with trauma and Natives." I'm like, "No, I should not. I fit into a lot of different categories. Women, I politely, respectfully, don't agree with you." But it's just constantly people trying to, that dominant society trying to put me into a box and make me fit into this box that I don't want to be in. And one of the experiences that really started me, because I did struggle, I've struggled with, because of that trauma that I endured as a child, and being incarcerated, I struggled with a lot of things just to try to live my life and not be incarcerated and go to school and have a job. And one of the biggest experiences that turned that around for me is being more involved in my culture. And that started in the sweat lodge when I was in prison, going to the sweat lodge. And when when I went to prison, they're like, "Okay, are you Mexican? Are you Native? Okay, you're Native. Okay, go over there." And then, you're kind of going into these spaces, like within prison, like the cultural spaces and things like that, and learning about culture. And then from there, having those resources available to me upon reentry, of, NARA, Native American Recovery Association. That's where I met Barb, and like being involved culturally there, being involved culturally with my own nation, and, everything that goes with that. But that's was so healing to me, to find those ways and to start to see and understand that there's not just a dominant society, and that all the things that I was feeling those years, even as a young child, and I was like, "This is not right. Something doesn't feel right here," was validated that it isn't right. And it isn't, dominant society is the only way. There are other ways, and there are other ways that feel right for me. So, yeah, that's the one thing that I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any comments about that?
Yeah. I think that, the societal construct of whiteness, right? Like, it's not actually a bloodline. Like, it's the societal construct. Like, Irish people were not white for the longest time. It's whoever, this dominant society want to make it. And I think historically, even if you had like one drop of any other sort of blood, like that disqualifies you, right? And, trying to fit in with the dominant cultural paradigm, like that was a huge goal of mine, because my family, my mother came back from, an overdose and died, and she was trying to get re-registered in high school. And they're like, "Why? Like, you're not going to finish, like, what's the point of scheduling you for high school? Like, we already know just based on your demographic that you're not going to do it," And I think like learning those stories and looking at how my family was treated by dominant society made me really eager to be like, well, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I want these credentials. I want to, but being in it, and being in law school in particular. And, I don't think I shared, but I'm an attorney, and being a officer of the court, right? And operating in that dominant society kind of oppressor structure. I had to take property law like 3 times. Because the basis of property law is that doctrine of discovery, right? And just having to interface with the foundation, like the rules of how we're supposed to interact in this society, and who gets to decide whether or not you get your liberty taken away, or if you lose your life, or if someone kills you, they're going to be held accountable. Because I think this is just my opinion, but I think there's a lot of evidence out there to support it, that the rules of dominant society don't get applied equally, so having to navigate that And, you know, like I was kind of talking about earlier, I don't know if I'm really addressing your question, but having to be all these different parts and operate within the structure of dominant society is really frustrating and difficult, you know? And I think that dominant society, I'll just end with this. Like, I think the way that we've been doing things, the status quo, it's not working. It's not working for the planet, and less people are fitting into that paradigm and able to operate in it. So I think going back to, you know, our indigenous teachings and taking care of the land and the water, you know, I do think that the dominant paradigm is on its way out, but it's going to go out kind of kicking and screaming, and we're all having to deal with it as it goes through that transition. So that's all I have to say on that.
Anybody else? Yvette, you're on mute.
I will add, looking back at my life, I really, in hindsight, I really see a lot of just grace, as well as being born in Chicago, because you were in a black or white demographic, right? And it was really no white. So you were in the area that I was in, and white was a horrible thing to be, right? So it was just horrible. No one wanted to be white, and white was just, you know, it was the white blue-eyed devil was really a coined term in the community that I was in. So I never wanted to be white, and I never tried to fit in. So I'm really happy about that, right? But thank God, like, I'm happy now that white is not, you know, they are, you know, that dominant society is like losing their power, right? And they're being exposed in many ways, but in and out of jail systems and court systems throughout my youth and young adult life. I will say that, you know, everyone in my family has been in prison. I'm the only one that did not go to prison. And looking back at that, I know that it was because of my race and the way I looked. There was 1 week where I was in court twice for 2 felonies, and the judge let me out, and those end up getting dismissed. And I was just like remembering, like, I don't know how, like, how did that happen? And, you know, being in the awareness and the space that I'm at now, it's definitely, I know that it was my skin color. So, you know, I did, you know, looking back, I can see where my race in dominant society in the judicial court system allowed me not to go to prison. So I just kind of wanted to add that by with the dominant society top subject. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah. You know, the thing that came to my mind when I was listening to you talk about it, the thing that I probably struggled with the most was the feeling of being a traitor. Because I deeply wanted to fit into dominant society, just because of the nature of like what my family life was like. It was really disruptive. My mother was essentially the black sheep of our family because of the decisions she was making about who she had children with and the way that she lived her life and those kinds of things. And I wanted to fit into society because I wanted to really break out of like the system of life that I grew up with. And feeling as somehow I was a traitor because I wanted to be a part of that. And also there was this deep resonance of shame around that I was somehow a contributor because I was white too. And I think about like conversations. You know, it's been many years now, but I remember being a kid and being in like dominant society engagements, and someone would have something to say about one side or the other, about what it was to be white or what it was to be Black, and not having a voice because I didn't want to disrupt the flow, like nothing to get me ostracized from whatever community, and having, and what it told me, like, to be able to like integrate in those communities is that dishonesty was required. And so like, that was the, like, kind of the navigation tool, is that it wasn't okay to like show up authentically as myself. And it really planted the seed of being a liar. And that was like, and it was something that I even passed down to my own children, is that if you want to fit, then you need to like develop these, you know, what Jacinda was talking about, these chameleon skills, so that you fit into these spaces, so that you can, you know, get some footing, so that it's not necessary anymore. But of course, by the time you have adapted enough to be able to acquire any resource, that becomes an embedded part of who you are. And so, that was just really my contribution. That's what I was thinking about when you're talking about.
Barb, do you have anything?
I mean, I have all kinds of stuff, but I guess I'll keep it short and sweet. I guess the thing that I think of now is like, I can't even remember what the question was, but it had something to do with the dominant society. So all this, you know, the thing that I think about is like, I have created this environment for myself that is just so steeped in Native culture, Native American culture, that, you know, in school, I made sure to take everything Native I could, you know, environmental science through Native American lens, you know, all kinds of stuff. And so I just, you know, and I also was a philosophy major. So, you know, there was that conflict, because so it was like living in my own skin, but like also going to school and kind of having that conflict. But I just, you know, I have this lens now that just doesn't allow me to not notice patriarchy, you know, and how it exists, and literally almost all literature and you know, and in every system that you encounter through social services and you know, and people you see who are in leadership, you know, even at our you know, Native American nonprofit organization, like there's a lot of Native people there, but like, you know, the people in the big roles, you know, in the director roles are all non-Native people. And so I just, you know, I feel like I'm constantly like having this like you know, advocacy you know, lens on, where it's just like I constantly in conflict with like this world. It's like, you know, this idea of like living in two different worlds, and some, you know, could say like it's like, you know, being like this traditional Native ceremonial, you know, spiritual person, which conflicts with a lot of you know, dominant society. And then, you know, and kind of, you know, and some, you know, in Hollywood would say beads and feathers and leather, you know, which, you know, yes, but no. And then this other side where it's like, you know, there's this academic world where power and capitalism and consumerism, you know, is a huge part of also who, you know, that's what I want. I want things. I want land. I want, you know, clout. I want, you know, but like, so it's like in constant conflict, and it's like I can't shut off my, like, seeing the system of oppression constantly everywhere I go. And I just, you know, and it's like, I just kind of want to rest sometimes from that, but it's like I can't, because there's no rest to be had, because I feel like, you know what they say, like when you're woke, you can't, there's no rest until, you know, and until the wrongs are righted. And so I don't know, you know, it's a struggle for me, you know, even to be around my family, you know, because my family is, you know, one half is white and one half is Indian. And so I'm in constant conflict with myself. And so anyway, it's a bigger, you know, conversation than we have time for, but like, that's just what I wanted to add to this. So thank you for bringing up the question, Sarai, and thank you, ladies, for listening to your feedback and wisdom, and I appreciate being a part of this group. Thank you.
I just want to thank each and every one of you for being so vulnerable. This is a really hard topic, but I think that it's also a topic that, you know, so many people need to hear, and that they're struggling through it and they don't have the words for it, and they don't have the life experience yet for it. And so that we have gone through this and are coming out on the other side and are able to stand in our power and be like, no, I'm not who you say I am. I'm who I say I am. And like that, just to even do that gives other people hope. And so I think, you know, that's what we're doing here tonight. And so I really appreciate you, you know, coming around here and bearing it all. So, yeah, so hopefully we can, you know, have some more conversations in the future. And does anybody have anything they want to say before we go? Okay. I love you guys. And
oh.
Well, I think we should, you know, I wanted to say something, because I think it's always so important to, you know, when you talk about these things, you know, it brings up old stuff for me. You know what I mean? It brings up childhood trauma, and, you know, it just awakens. So I just, you know, I brought my little shell,
okay.
little sweetgrass out.
Yeah.
So, you know, I want to honor us in that way, you know, because it,
thank you.
You know, I don't want to, I'm wounded, you know,
Yeah.
I'm wounded, and I don't want to leave here wounded. I want to leave here empowered. So
love it. I was thinking,
medicine,
what are we doing for self-care now?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and we could just say a little prayer.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Sarai, do you have or does anybody have the Great Spirit prayer? It's always a good one.
I can look it up.
Do you have that Red Road book, or anybody?
Yeah, I can look it up right now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You could.
Do we want this on camera?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Know that
Great Spirit
prayer.
I too want to say thank you, ladies. I really appreciated being in the space with you. I don't know what I expected that we were going to do here together today, but it really is empowering to hear other women's lens on this issue. It's not something that gets talked about in mainstream culture, really ever. And I'm not sure why that is, because we are really, in fact, such a mixed bag. You would think that it would be a more prevalent conversation, but it was really empowering to hear other women's views on this. And so, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
So good to see you, Carolyn.
So good to see you.
Oh man, is this it?
Starts out, oh great Spirit,
Yeah.
the wind.
Great Spirit, give us hearts to understand.
No.
I have.
Go ahead. It's on. If you have the Red Road to Wellbriety book,
okay.
It's on. I think page 75.
I got it. All right, ready?
All right. Yep.
We smudged up. We getting smudged up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
O great spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I come before you, one of your children. I'm small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty. Make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may know the things you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. I seek strength to be superior to my brother, to not be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades as a fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame.
Miigwech.
I like that prayer, and like even in everything that I'm saying, that I said tonight, and about dominant society and all that, like I know that every single person is struggling, even if you can't see it, even if it looks like they have everything all together and that they're not struggling and they got the material things, right? Every person has things that they're struggling with in their life, and it may not be the kinds of things that I struggle with. So I'm like, that's not a struggle, but it's not a struggle for me. But it's a struggle for them. So, I just want to acknowledge that as well.
Thank you for saying that. And I think it would, what's that saying? We'd be remiss if we didn't also say that as Native Americans, and other cultural tribal people, we are so blessed, so lucky to have the culture we have, and to have the ancestors who fought and laid their lives on the ground for us to to be able to continue our traditional ways and have the ability to relearn our languages and revitalize our cultures and because they're such beautiful and strong cultures that people are starting to come back to the indigenous way of being and knowing. So we would be remiss if we didn't show that love to our ancestors. So
yes, agreed. Hey Yvette, you want to sing us a song?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, put me on the spot. Let me grab my drum. Shoot. I only know a few songs right now. I'll do you guys want to hear a healing song or a prayer song?
Healing song.
Healing song.
We're open.
Okay, this song was gifted to the Duwamish by the Quileute, Vince Ping. It's been a while since I've sung it. Whoa, whoa, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Hey, yeah. Oh, yeah. Whoa, whoa, yeah. Hey, hey, whoa. Aslahel told Dugwe.
But no. You feel good, ladies?
Wait, see, I
Much better.
Great.
Farewell,
Yeah.
lady.